Welcome to A Climate Change, a show where we talk with change makers and thought leaders who are taking action to stop the existential threat of climate change. I'm your host, Matt Matern. Today we have two exceptional guests on the program, Walter Lamb and Bruce Robertson, both of whom have dedicated significant efforts to preserving the Ballona Wetlands. For those who aren't familiar, the Ballona Wetlands is one of the largest wetlands in Los Angeles County and a natural habitat for over 600 species of plants and animals. Walter and Bruce have been instrumental in protecting this vital ecosystem, ensuring that it remains a haven for wildlife and a green space for our community. We'll dive into the ongoing challenges and victories in preserving the Ballona Wetlands and discuss what this means for our community and beyond. Without further ado, welcome to the program, Walter Lamb and Bruce Robertson. I've got two great guests on the program today, Walter Lamb and Bruce Robertson, who both done a lot of work on the Ballona Wetlands, which is a place kind of near and dear to all of our hearts who live here on the west side of Los Angeles. It's a wetlands that it's the largest wetlands in kind of Los Angeles County and probably one of the largest ones in California. Both Bruce and Walter have done a lot of work to preserve this wetlands for all of us living in this area. And I kind of wanted to tee this up as tomorrow we're going to be, or later actually this evening, President Biden and former President Trump are going to be having a debate. And I think looking at environmental issues over the next 5 months is an important focus of this podcast, and trying to talk about these issues and say, hey, what are the consequences for the nation as we go forward, and what are those choices that we're going to be making at the voting booth, and how those votes will affect our environment here locally, nationally, internationally. So we'll be tying those themes in as we talk to Walter and Bruce about the Ballona Wetlands and how that it affects the community here in Los Angeles, but also how it affects kind of the wider world, and how these environmental policies are both national and statewide. And there are a lot of factors at play in preserving wetlands like this. There's a lot of moving parts. So welcome to the program, Walter and Bruce. So why don't we start off, Walter, with you. You work with the Ballona Wetlands Land Trust. Tell us a little bit about your work with that organization.
Yeah, so we were founded in 1994 with the purpose of trying to preserve more land. And I know that the film that Bruce made talks about this era in the late 90s when one of the groups had settled with the developer for less land than a lot of us thought could be saved. And so a lot of groups sprung up to try to save more land, and we did. At the time, it was probably going to be around 300 acres, less than 300 acres, and we were able to preserve twice that amount, close to 600 acres. And since that time, we have advocated for policies that preserve land, protect it from encroachment. We have a lot of, because it's so urban adjacent, a lot of encroachment threats that we have to deal with quite often. For example, just recently, the Lincoln Boulevard, there's a proposal to widen that pretty busy thoroughfare, and that would encroach upon the wetlands. So we're trying to work with Caltrans and the Department of LA to see if we can, again, minimize or eliminate that encroachment. But we focus on education. We do a lot of outreach to the community, try to go to public meetings and advocate for the wetlands, field trips, that sort of thing. But we do also do litigation. We've actually done a lot of litigation. We have some litigation ongoing right now. And especially as it relates to the Ballona Wetlands Restoration Project, which is a project that's been in the planning process for about 20 years, but hasn't really progressed very far. And we're trying to figure out a way to help the wetlands reach their ecological potential in the interim, because this project has taken so long, and we think it's poorly designed. That's sort of the net of it, our 30-year history in 30 seconds.
So who is managing the restoration project now? Is that the Army Corps of Engineers, or is it partly the state, or is it a hodgepodge of multiple groups?
That's a great question. The the Corps was involved for a while, but they've dropped out because they requested from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. That's the lead agency under CEQA, and they're the land managers. So they're really the ones driving the show. And the Corps of Engineers, there was a discrepancy in the flood control, which seems like a pretty important thing. And they actually got it off. It was off by about 50%. And so the Corps said, well, you need to fix that, and you need to give us all this additional engineering information. That was going to be cost prohibitive. So what the Department of Fish and Wildlife did instead was that they haven't given them that information, and they've been working on a much smaller project that they're going to try to commence with. But the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers hasn't been involved since September of 2019, so almost 5 years.
So where do you see this going? I mean, should people be taking action to talk to the state departments here in California, Department of Fish and Wildlife, to put pressure on them to move this project along? Because as some of us know, there's an invasive weed problem, and that only a small portion of this 577 acres is really kind of restored to its pristine, natural state, and a lot of it is invaded by weeds.
Right, and that's a really good point. And so, I guess a couple of notes: you're going to have different people with different perspectives on which plants, in that spectrum of native, non-native, invasive, which ones are the most harmful. We certainly agree. We want to see much more native vegetation there, and we think that's possible right now through community stewardship. So we definitely think that the community should be speaking up and saying, since this other project is so far out into the future, let's get some community stewardship going on right now. That's beneficial in many ways. It helps, again, the habitat there, but it also helps get the community more involved. It shifts us away from arguing, which has been going on at Ballona Wetlands for about 40 years now, and gets different groups together out there, rolling up their sleeves, fresh air, and working to restore the habitat. So in terms of the amount of land that's functioning, that's a really tricky question because, it's Los Angeles. So there's not probably a single square inch out there that's what it was, 200, 300 years ago. But right off Jefferson, for anyone who rides, who commutes on Jefferson Boulevard through Playa del Rey, you're going to see a seasonal wetland, a non-tidal wetland, right at the edge of Jefferson Boulevard that is full right now with ducks. There was a lot of nesting ducks, wading birds, you name it. We've had dozens and dozens of species there. So I think the extent of the degradation is sometimes exaggerated by the groups that are pushing for the project. But no question, there needs to be some work done. We think that can be done right now with community stewardship. And we think that the project as designed is not a good idea. So we have been opposing that project. And but really the issue is it's no longer viable, we don't think, economically. We don't think it's actually ever going to get done anyways. So we really need to focus on the community stewardship.
So what is the project as designed? What does that entail?
Well, the full project involves knocking down the existing flood control levees, and that would require a permit from the Army Corps of Engineers, and then recontouring the creek into more of a winding shape, and then moving the levees back to the perimeter of the ecological reserve, so allowing more of the water to come in. So, and up to that point, I would certainly, think that sounds like a good idea. The problem is when you actually look at the designs, they have to put that soil somewhere. They have to build the new levees, and they have to maintain the flood control, right? Because we're in a pretty urbanized environment. And that's where things went off the rails a little bit. First of all, like I said, they got the flood control numbers wrong. And so that's going to take them quite a bit of effort to get those corrected. But also, one of the areas that they want to build the new levee is right on top of existing endangered species habitat, the Belding Savannah sparrow, which is going to get a new name soon. And so that was a problem for us right off the bat. It's really rare for a restoration project to actually be destroying the existing breeding habitat of an endangered bird. Friends of Ballona Wetlands, who I know you spoke with a couple of years ago, they had the same concern that they voiced in their comments. They said, this seems extreme. It seems ecologically irresponsible. They've since softened that opposition. But it is a big deal, actually, to get rid of so much, really all of the existing breeding habitat. Now, they would argue that they would hope that there's going to be some new habitat developed as part of the restoration plan. But that's a big if. These are birds that have a lot of site fidelity, which means they don't really just always go around and explore looking for a new habitat to breed in. So that's a big concern for us with the project. But again, because they have really not made any effort in the last 5 years to get permits from the Army Corps, we don't think they're really even pursuing that particular project anymore, which is part of the issue.
Well, I'd say one theme that I hear coming through from your comments is those of us who are, neighbors or affected by this project directly have to become more engaged in the process to make sure that the good decisions are being pushed and moved forward, because otherwise, if we just kind of outsource our thinking to other powers that be, they may not make the best choices. So kudos to you and your group for kind of keeping eyes on it. It's a bit shocking that they could get the flood control numbers wrong by whatever 50% off. You'd think that they would have had good engineers doing this, but they make mistakes from time to time. So you have to really continue to kick the tires. Bruce, I'd like to bring you into the conversation. Bruce, you did a documentary on the Balona Wetlands back years ago and won some awards for it. Tell us how you became involved, and tell us a bit about the documentary and maybe where people can find it on YouTube. And it's beautifully shot, and you can see a lot of the species that live in that area, and it's pretty phenomenal here in this urban area to have so many different species living right here.
Yeah, thank you. I've been a resident of the west side of Los Angeles, Venice, and Mar Vista for 35, 40 years. And a long time ago, we used to really enjoy driving by this open area and seeing that there was some undeveloped area in Los Angeles. I've always been a nature lover. In the early 80s or late 90s, late 80s or early 90s, there was a councilwoman here named Ruth Galanter, and then there was the Friends of the Balona Wetlands, who had up to that point been opposing the project, and they made a deal, a compromise with, at the time it was a developer called McGuire Thomas, who was initiating the original Playa Vista plan. And it was touted as a great compromise between environmentalists and the powers that be in business. And I didn't pay a lot of attention to it. But then in the mid 90s, I met some people that were involved with the Bolso Chico Wetlands project, and I started looking at what exactly was involved in the plans for the Playa Vista project. And as I started looking into it, I realized that there was very little real habitat being saved, and they had plans for massive residential projects west of Lincoln Boulevard. And I think, if I remember correctly, over 12,000 units or something like that. So when I saw that, I thought, wow, that doesn't really sound like a very good compromise. And I started talking with other people about it. And it was around that time that the Balona Wetlands Land Trust was also starting to get formed and get involved. And so several of us started meeting together and realized that we thought there was some work to do, and that we decided that compromise was not acceptable, as it wasn't in the best interest of the wildlife there. And so we started forming a coalition. I also started a nonprofit called Bayona Valley Preservation League. And eventually we were able to get over 80 environmental groups to come on to this coalition, including Sierra Club and Surf Rider Foundation, CalPERG, and some other significant players in the LA environmental movement. And we started gaining traction. We filed a lawsuit challenging the environmental impact statement that the project had, and eventually got a favorable ruling from a court that described their decision for on the approval process. The judge called it arbitrarious and capricious and arbitrary, and so we were gaining momentum. During that time, I started going out. I'm a private investigator. I also am a videographer, and I started going out in the wetlands and just filming wildlife there, just for the purpose of documenting the wildlife that was there. Because one thing that became apparent to me is that when people drive by it, it just looked like barren land and really didn't, it doesn't have the majesty. Wetlands, have PR problems. They don't have the majesty of the redwoods or waterfalls or anything like that. And so people, may not recognize them as the important habitat that they are, and how valuable they are. So as I was filming, I was getting great wildlife video of species there that people weren't even aware were there. I started showing it to people, and they said, "Oh, you've got to make a film about this. This is amazing. We got to get this out." So I embarked on making a documentary film. I was fortunate enough to have the advice of a documentary film professor at USC by the name of Amanda Pope, who helped me a lot in informing the documentary, and eventually came up with a 14-minute short film about saving the wetlands and the wildlife that was there and the threat of the development, and was well received. I won several awards in wildlife film festivals and things like that, and that was a great boon to our efforts. And they continued on into the later 90s and early 2000s, and then eventually it was a stalemate for a while. We had this court ruling, but the developer was appealing it, and things weren't really moving in either direction. And then we were able to get, there was a ballot on the, it was a California ballot that provided some significant funds for wildlife acquisition in the early 90s. And eventually we were able to get money under that legislation approved for purchase of the wetlands, which eventually resulted in the deal with the developer to get the 600 or so acres into a trust, a public land trust, and at the same time, there was $100 million that was provided to the developer to purchase that land. It was, for some people, that was a little controversial because we were trying to stop the entire development, and at the same time, we, ended up with a compromise that gave them money that, some people felt was supporting. Well, it was obvious a help to them, but we decided that, that was a compromise we had to make, and I think it was a very good compromise. And as Walter said, there are now around 600 acres of wildlife habitat that are slated for, they're already in the public trust and can never be taken out of it.
Yeah, it's a fantastic result and a great story. And one of the things that I picked up on that you talked about was the wetlands have a PR problem. And I thought that was kind of brilliant. Particularly, I had just been at this Hollywood Climate Summit, and they were talking about how the oil and gas people have been just, incredibly successful at having a PR to support what they're doing. So they have sold effectively their thing. And one of the things they were talking about is that this kind of PR genius Smertz for Mobil Oil, one of the things that he would do was support things like Masterpiece Theater. But one of the areas they supported most on public television was wildlife programs and wildlife documentaries to kind of give this soft feel of, hey, the oil companies, we like environmental things, and we're not so bad, and we can protect certain areas that are really nice, but
Mhm.
other areas really aren't that big of a deal. So it was kind of this brilliant PR strategy, and we could all in the environmental movement take some pages out of their very slick PR strategy to promote the environment, because the environment hasn't really had as an effective advocate as these trillion-dollar oil companies have spun their needs very effectively. And real estate developers and tobacco industry, all those guys have tremendous PR machines that
Mhm.
spin messages that aren't anywhere near accurate, but they're persuasive in their ability to get people to think, oh, darn oil companies, they're not so bad. Um,
Mhm.
so anyway, kudos to both of you for helping protect this amazing piece of wetlands in an area that's highly populated. So pivoting back to you, Walter, in terms of um, where we're at, and seeing it's a multi-decade endeavor to continue to fight for our native, our wetlands and areas in nature. It isn't something that just goes away, because there's constantly a need to kind of um, curate these areas to make sure they stay wild. So tell us, what are the next steps that you're looking at and your organization is going to be doing to help protect this area?
Well, our biggest focus right now is getting some sort of interim stewardship and access in place. There was actually a state commission document in 2005 called the Interim Access and Stewardship Management Plan that unfortunately kind of got put on the shelf. And, one of the reasons is because this large scale restoration proposal has that we've been hearing for 20 years that's 2 or 3 years away. It's always 2 or 3 years away. And so people are saying sometimes, well, let's just wait, right? And if you're going to remodel your kitchen, you're probably not going to paint your kitchen before you remodel, right? So it comes down to a timing issue. And what we're trying to do now is get the community to speak up and, really try to get the policy change so that really all across the 600 acres, being really sensitive to wildlife, really sensitive to the habitats, sensitive to cultural resources as well. That's important. Tribal consultation, all of those things, get everyone together and come up with a plan where we're taking care of this as a community right now. So trying to make sure that we have some of our wetland plants that have room to grow and that they're not being choked out by these invasive weeds that you've talked about. Amazingly enough, Area A, which is the area just north of the creek, and that is one of the areas that would have been developed by Playa Vista under the Friends settlement had we not kept pushing and gotten the money, as Bruce talked about, for acquisition of that land. And even a little bit of the land in Area B that was going to get developed. There's a good graphic of that in Bruce's film. But there has not been any community stewardship to speak of in Area A for as long as I can remember. And so we're trying to do that now. So we get kids from schools, church groups, Boy and Girl Scout, Cub Scouts, you name it, local communities, California Conservation Corps, to come out and just hand pull, because that's the most effective. That's more effective than herbicide. It's safer than herbicide. It's more effective than weed whacking. And to pull these weeds out, to plant new plants, or to spread native seed. We already have a lot of alkali heath and alkali weed and other native plants growing in Area A, and even more so in Area B. And then the baseball fields in Area C, we'd really like for those to be accessible for more than just the baseball players. There's a lot of kids in LA who are really interested in nature. A lot of them come from disadvantaged communities. A lot of them don't have the same access from a career path perspective as a lot of other people do to go out and get a PhD and get a lucrative career in the environment. There are actually pretty lucrative careers in the environment if you can go get a master's degree or a PhD. There's a lot of people charging between $300 and $500 an hour to do surveys and monitoring. Every kid in Los Angeles should feel like that's a career path that's open to them. You talk to these people that will have the PhDs, and they'll almost always tell you they started camping as a kid, right? Their family would go to a particular place. They're always hiking. So for kids who are living in some of these more urban areas, we have to make sure we're getting them out, not just for one field trip, in their elementary school. But we just started a internship with a high school called Dorsey High School, and we have a few kids now who are coming out on a regular basis, and they're going to learn all the plants and the animals. We're going to teach them how to do nature walks. We're going to teach them how to, do all the things that they would do to sort of continue on in a career in the environment. So that's our big thrust right now. In terms of the large-scale restoration project, we are very confident that has imploded under its own weight. We don't think there's any chance that that's actually going to happen. And so what we're trying to do now is not have it be a zombie project for the next 10 years that continues to consume resources and attention, but rather, again, that we sort of shift back. That's not to say that they couldn't redesign that project to be feasible. Obviously fix the flood control would be one thing, design it so that it's not actually burying existing breeding habitat for endangered species. And we would love to help them do that. But again, I think that's going to take a consensus. It's going to take community sort of coming together around a table and problem solving. And right now, because this has been going on really for 40 plus years, it has gotten to be pretty polarized. And I think we need to depolarize this and get everyone back working in more of a problem solving collaborative mode.
Well, where are the politicians on this? Because I've had a couple of politicians that I think represent this district, Senator Ben Allen and Councilwoman Tracy Parks, and where are they, in this process?
Well, interestingly enough, we're not aware of a single politician who has come out with a statement in favor of the project or come out with a statement, in opposition to the project. And I think, partly that's just good politics, is wait and see. But I do think we're at the time now where we need folks, not necessarily to come out with the large scale project, because again, we feel like that kind of died on its own, but to focus more on, what is going to happen? And I think where we're hoping to get them on board, we did get one great letter from Assemblywoman Tina McKinnor saying, hey, it's time for us to make this accessible to local kids to come out here and learn about nature. I'm happy to share that letter with you. We really want all the other elected officials to get on board with that, because there's so much promise at the Ballona Wetlands. We don't have to wait another 20 years for them to work through all their permitting and engineering issues. If you come down to the wetlands now, the Area A, right across from Whiskey Red's restaurant, every Wednesday through Saturday from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. is open to the public. And we're down there a lot. We're down there monitoring plants, taking pictures, documenting things. We were doing some weeding for a while. We're trying to get back to where we are able to do that again. So I would say to everyone, come on down, visit the wetlands, see for yourself what a great place it is to be. Even when you can see a lot of invasive weeds, you're going to see a lot of native plants as well, and lots of native wildlife. And it's also just great, to Bruce's point earlier, open space is so rare in Los Angeles. And this is an expansive open space. So we really need to just take advantage of what we have. And like I said, get the community together. We're not all going to agree on everything, right? It's messy, right? Democracy is messy. But if we can get enough people together and build enough of a consensus to move forward with something on the community level, we think that's going to transform this, what's already a gem into an even more valuable place ecologically and also from a community perspective. And tribal engagement is critical to that as well.
Well, thank you for keep pushing that forward, Walter. And Bruce, tell us a little bit about, what your thoughts are 30 years on from joining this process, and what you see as kind of things that people who want to get involved can do, and how somebody like yourself takes the bull by the horns and just goes out and starts documenting the problem and says, hey, let's just make a difference here.
Yeah, well, it was, I think I would like to encourage anybody that is a lover of nature or whatever injustice or problem you see in society. If you nowadays with iPhone, you can, or any type of cell phone, you can make a movie with that. We didn't have that when I was making my film, but I think individual activism is still in play, and that people can go out if they get interested in a project and start making a difference. And it's rewarding to be involved in that. I have not been involved in this restoration process. I I think that, it sounds like they were just biting off a lot more than was practical in terms of what they wanted to do to restructure the wetlands. And, they've been in the state that they are for, probably 50, 80 years. And I don't think a radical remake is just that practical at this point. So I really like Walter's point of view to just start getting people out on the land and start using this beautiful resource that we have, and be able to make that available to the community as well. I also want to make one other little pitch, and that is that I am looking for a web designer or web developer to post my video. And the content is on a DVD, and if somebody out there wants to help out in that way, then we'd very much appreciate some help in that direction. If they could get in touch with you, Matt, and let us know.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, all these little pieces of activism help spread the word, and your film was a great piece of activism, and it's very, it's propitious timing in that I was just at this Hollywood Film Festival or Hollywood, and they're talking about getting these messages out to people, and you did exactly kind of what they're talking about doing now 30 years later, which is getting out there, filming things, getting the word out, and making a difference. And we can all do that, like you said, document what's happening, share it, post it, get engaged, talk to your representatives, and it's similar to what Walter was saying. Let's take some baby steps here and make some progress. We may not hit perfection, but we can make some progress, pull some weeds, get out there, show kids what it's like to see these amazing wetlands in person, see some of the amazing wildlife that we have here in LA, which kind of is hidden in plain sight from a lot of our views. Maybe a lot of us don't see the kinds of things that you see at the Ballona Wetlands just walking down your average street. So I encourage everybody to get out there, get involved, check out the Friends of Balona Wetlands as well. They've certainly been an organization that's been involved in this for a long time, have done a lot of good work. So it's taken kind of a village of lots of different activists to make this tremendous difference, and kind of giving you the final word, Bruce, as far as, how does it feel 30 years on from the beginning of this journey to drive by this place or walk into this place and see that it has been preserved because of efforts that you've taken along with others?
Well, you're exactly right, Matt. It is very, very satisfying to drive through there and see that at least west of Lincoln Boulevard, there's still beautiful open space there. It's very satisfying. I'm glad we still have that great resource in Los Angeles, and I do think that people should take away from the struggle that we waged. That you can make a difference, and it just takes persistence. And as you said, I encourage people to get out to the wetlands and see what's there, because there's beautiful nature there, and you just gotta kind of get down on the ground level to see it.
I always argue that one of the best things people can do to help the Ecological Reserve is to get there for a visit. I know a lot of people hear about it, via mechanisms like this, which are important, but it's great to actually be there, to see the wildlife, to see the native plants, also the invasive plants, right? To get understanding of, the situation, so that they can make, more informed decisions about, what kind of policies they might support. And as I mentioned, the Area A is north of the creek, and it's basically in Marina Del Rey, right across from Whiskey Red's restaurant. And it's open from Wednesdays through Saturdays, 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. That's a great place to go on your own. You can always ask us, one of our folks, to join you. I can be reached at walter@bayona.org. We've got Sophia, Gabrielle at the same address. Shoot us an email and we can meet you down there, but we're just go on your own and explore for yourself. And then east of that,
is a place called Area C. That's not open to the public. So anyone who drives by on Culver Boulevard sees the baseball fields. Interestingly enough, those baseball fields are in the Ecological Reserve, but we'd love to get those fields also open for nature education and appreciation. Right now, that area is not open. And then south of the creek, of course, is we call Area B, and Nature Nexus Institute does first Monday and second Sunday. So tomorrow, July 6th will be an event, and I'll be volunteering for them and leading a bird walk. And then east of that is the freshwater marsh that you mentioned earlier, and that's at the corner of Lincoln Boulevard and Jefferson Boulevard. That's actually not inside the Ecological Reserve, and just to be clear, our organization doesn't have a whole lot to do with that, other than we look at the studies in terms of the hydrological connection from the freshwater marsh to the rest of the Ecological Reserve. But definitely get there. That's the first thing. And then the other bit of advice I guess that I would have is always try to stay focused on the wildlife and the plants. This is something that's been going on for 40 years, and there is a lot of acrimony. You're going to get a lot of, there are people who feel like they've chosen sides, and there's a lot of debate. The last thing we want is for people to think that the Ballona Wetlands is just something people fight over, right? That's the last thing that it is. It's a really amazing place. So if you get down there and then just start to, focus positively on, what kind of change can we make right now to improve some of the things we've talked about: trash, invasive vegetation, better habitat for the wildlife. So that's the biggest takeaway I would leave with your listeners.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for joining us on the program today, Bruce and Walter, and appreciate your activism and kind of giving the arc of a history project here as to what it takes to make a difference. And some of these small steps end up doing something phenomenal, and having a group of people getting together and waging a fight against big developers and politicians who aren't necessarily always looking out for our best interest or the best interest of the wildlife. I mean, that's something that you point out in your documentary. Here, the voice of the voiceless is all the wildlife there. And as you said, there's 500 species of plants and animals in this fairly small area that help protect. And that's a pretty phenomenal result. And kudos to you for helping do all that great work.
Thank you, Matt, and kudos to you for what you're doing with this podcast and your commitment to the environment. It's something that I very much respect, and thank you for.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and looking forward to giving you some good news soon.
Have a great day, everybody. And that was Bruce Robertson and Walter Lamb. If you want to learn more about the Ballona Wetlands Land Trust, visit Ballona.org. And you can watch Bruce's documentary on YouTube by searching the Culver City Historical Society and Ballona Wetlands. To learn more about our work at A Climate Change and how you can help us reach our goal of planting 30,000 trees in the Amazon this year, visit aclimatechange.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you like this episode, please share it with a friend. See you next time.